Hi, it's Rob Bowron with Sharp College Football, and today we're going to preview the Buckeyes, a team that has no pressure coming into this year. If this is your first time tuning in, this is a Sharp College Football preview for the coming season. I'm Rob Bowron. I'm the econometrician behind Bowron, an advanced stat system for college football. We're going to run through previewing the Buckeyes for this season. We're going to look at it from an advanced stats perspective. So if you're looking for a preview that's going to dive really deep into the depth chart, I really highly recommend finding your local beat writer. They've been there with covering the team. They're going to be able to tell you, which second stringer stood out in spring, that kind of thing, who's likely to emerge, all of that. We're going to look at how the Buckeyes have performed from an advanced stats perspective, project them into the season, look at the schedule, talk about some things that they've done well, talk about some new faces, including Chip Kelly, and kind of try to look at it from a perspective of the numbers, I guess you could say. So that's, if you're into that, then please tune in. We're going to walk through, if this is your first time tuning in, we're going to walk through the offense, the defense, then we're going to walk through the schedule. We'll start out with kind of an overall view and then, finish with kind of an overall summary and view of it. These usually run about 25 minutes ish, sometimes a little over if I have a lot to say, sometimes a little less if I'm, feeling quick. Anyway, yeah, this season, I think, again, it sets up a little bit like last year in that I don't think, last year I said that I didn't think that anyone amongst the contenders was going to be able to put together the kind of like massive offensive season that would sort of, leave everybody else behind. That opened up the door for, teams like Michigan coming into the year. Really, Ohio State is a team that I think, in the past couple seasons, if we look back at like Ryan Day's first year, in 2019, they did put up really, really big offensive numbers that year. That said, it's sort of been a steady decline since. Last season, they put up reasonably pedestrian offensive numbers, but this year, look, I'm going to go out and say like right now, and, Chip Kelly is a very good offensive play caller. He's never been a great play caller. Even his best Oregon teams don't really hold a candle to like some of the very best offenses we've seen in college football. He's very good. But I hesitate to sort of say, I think a lot of people are like, we've got a home run hire with Chip Kelly. You didn't just go out and hire Steve Sarkisian. And I think I think there's a reasonable argument that Ryan Day, if he has his fastball, which he hasn't in the last couple of years, mostly because of the decline of the running game, if he has his fastball, is a better play caller than Chip Kelly. I don't think Day has his fastball right now. I think the decline of the running game and the offensive line play has been a major factor in that. So in comes Kelly. He's got a slightly different run game, a bit more sophisticated than Day runs. So perhaps that opens things back up for the Buckeyes a little bit. But I would definitely say I would not expect Ohio State's not going to be putting up like LSU type numbers like LSU put up last season. And of course, like before, I feel like I should say this. This little disclaimer: don't quote counting stats to me. Don't quote like per game stats to me. Like those aren't real. They're real in the sense of like they happened, but they're not controlling for opponent. They're not controlling for field position. They're not controlling for game state, meaning like what's the actual score of the game or anything like that. Just pure counting stats are, you've come to the wrong place if you think we care about those. So they could put up some great counting stats this season. I would be surprised if they put up massive offensive numbers this year. I think Kelly is a very good offensive hire. I think he could clean some things up from where like they found themselves last season. I think you can also make a reasonable argument that like just better QB play could clean things up from where they were last season. But I also would say like I'm not sure that quarterback is Will Howard that's going to clean that up for them and really get that offense unstuck. Will Howard actually is a pretty good fit for what Kelly often likes to run. So that might work out pretty well. But again, like I wouldn't expect the Kelly Will Howard combo to put up like, Jaden Daniels type numbers, or like, Sark's offenses at Alabama type numbers. Like, this should just be a very good college offense. You pair that with what was just an outstanding defense under Jim Knowles last season. They bring back a ton of the guys that they wanted to bring back. Of course, the Buckeyes spent a ton of money in NIL to bring guys, keep them out of the draft. The defense should be just spectacular coming into this year. They were number 1 overall in beta rank last season. There's just a lot to like for this defense in particular. And that, I think, like for Day, look, I don't think Kerry Combs was Ryan Day's choice. I think Kerry Combs was somebody that got put on Ryan Day, I'm forgetting his name. Hafley, to replace Hafley. But Combs, didn't work out. Day did go out and get the right guy with Jim Knowles. He's just been great. The Buckeyes, I think, set themselves up, coming into this next season, really well. I think to make a national championship run, because, like I said, I don't think Georgia, with Mike Bobo calling plays, is a real threat to put together a massive offense. I think Bama themselves are likely to take a bit of a step back. I love the defensive coordinator hire that they have in place in Tuscaloosa. The offensive, even though you have DeBoer there, of course, to hold his hand, Nick Sheridan was really, really bad as an offensive coordinator when he was at Indiana. Deservedly got fired in Indiana for his play calling. Texas, I just don't think Sark's going to put it together with Ewers at quarterback. I think Ewers just doesn't really get the most out of that offense. I think he's holding them back a little bit. They're, again, not likely to put up massive offensive numbers coming into the year. I do have some concerns around their defense as well. It just leaves you with a set of teams coming into this next season that really, it's like Oregon might be one of your only contenders to put up massive offensive numbers coming into next year. I really like Will Stein as an offensive play caller. Dylan Gabriel, of course, is a really good college quarterback. May not be a pro prospect, but definitely a guy I think that could put up some video game type numbers in that Stein offense. So that said, I think that I think the Buckeyes have a shot with this team. In some ways, they remind me a bit of Michigan last season, in that they are really competent. They're going to be very good in all phases. And in a year that's a bit more like the years before we had really big offenses in college football. So like prior to 2017, 2018, and then running through, up until, 2021, 2022. In 2023, we just had what you might call a bit of a more normal year in college football at the top, where you don't have so much separation from the 1 and 2 teams versus the rest of the teams. The Buckeyes, I think, are going to set themselves up well here. They're not likely to get left in the dust by anybody. This should be a really good year for them. But for Day, it's probably, and I live in Columbus, Ohio, so I get to hear the talk. I didn't grow up, I grew up in Wyoming. I am utterly ambivalent about the Buckeyes from a rooting perspective, but for Day, this is really a make or break season. I think there are tremendous expectations on the team, given how much they've invested in NIL, that they do feel like they have a really good coordinator in Jim Knowles, bringing in Chip Kelly. They've just invested a lot in Day, and the expectations are extremely high. I think a lot of Buckeye fans got used to the dysfunction at Michigan, and that they got used to beating Michigan, and they really feel like they have to be able to make Day has to make a run this year, or else it's probably time to pull the plug. Even though Day's been nothing short of really, really good, the expectations are just that high here in Columbus. And I do think, I think they just got used to beating Michigan. didn't realize maybe that could come to an end. Anyway, we have them projected at number 2 coming into this year. They were finished at number 4 in 23. They were at number 4 in 22. That's pretty good and pretty consistent. They sit at number 5 overall in coaching and development, controlling for, returning production and recruiting. They do a really good job developing players at Ohio State. They're at number 54 in Bill Connolly's returning production coming back into this year. That's 65% of their returning production overall. They sit at number 2 overall in recruiting. They've done a phenomenal job here. And they were 15 overall in special teams last year. That's something to maybe keep an eye on. You'd like to see some improvement from them there, not leaving any money on the table. Most of what matters in special teams in college football, this isn't the pros, where every kicker is good. In college football, having a really good place kicker matters. Not leaving points on the table when you can make field goals matters a lot. I think a lot of people tend to focus on and remember tend to focus more on, the punt returns, kick returns, that kind of thing. And they tend to remember the really big plays. Those tend to matter less. Those don't happen a lot. The bread and butter, game in, game out, of special teams is doing really well on the really boring punt return, punt returns, getting a few extra yards in field position when you can regularly, and then just making your field goals. Do I have this on here? I do, actually. So, this is, we're going to run through real quick. This is how they performed overall. Versus teams last season. This is scored versus Ohio State themselves grade for the season. So you can tell here, Indiana was not a great game for them. They played below the level that they played on average over the entire season. They had a really good game against Western Kentucky, but they struggled a little bit against Notre Dame. They left some points on the board. I mean, that game really shouldn't have been quite as close as it was. Ohio State should have had really largely, I think a lot of focus in that game was that Notre Dame, and look, it's an advanced stats I'm not super fond of in success rate, because it doesn't take into account the big plays. And I think people in college, I think people in advanced stats can sometimes take big plays as a little bit too random, as if they're not generated on purpose. And they often are. And Ohio State has an offense that's geared to generate big plays. And they hit some big plays in that game, but didn't convert them all into points. They had a really bad game. Worst game of the year actually was against Maryland. That was a really rough outing for them. They really struggled in that one. That was followed up by their most dominant performance of the season. They had a really good game against Purdue. Pretty good game overall against Penn State, followed by, not their best performances against Wisconsin and Rutgers. Michigan State game was really good. The Minnesota game, they played pretty well. It's odd. The Michigan game actually shows up as a good performance. They played really well in that game, and they played Michigan really even. Michigan also, if you profile that for them, they also played Ohio State really even in that game. It just didn't quite work out for the Buckeyes. They failed to convert some points. Otherwise, they'd likely walk away with the win. The Missouri game, we don't weight the bowls a ton at Sharp College Football. Outside of the playoff, the bowls tend to be significantly downweighted here, so not a great game for them. Sort of a wash given how we treat bowl season around these parts. So let's hop in and do the offense and defense. Want the shoot? Yeah, that's the one we need. All right. Offensively, they were at number 11 last season. Chip Kelly's your new offensive play caller. They were at number 3 overall in 2022. So they've been, 11 is a pretty significant fall back from them overall. Kelly had a massive fall off last year after Dorian Thompson-Robinson had moved on to the NFL. That fall off, I think, TBD. I had an opportunity through, running a Pac-12 podcast with Bryant, and watching a lot of UCLA football over the years. I do think that Kelly runs an interesting offense. I do think that he runs a smart offense and often got the best out of the talent. And Chip Kelly is not terribly committed to recruiting as a head coach. So he often got the best out of talent that he had. But that said, TBD. I'm interested to see what this looks like. But offensively, they really struggled last year in Columbus, relatively speaking to where they've been. So number 11 overall offense. So this scale you see here for them with number 11 there, number 1 would have been LSU's offense last season. Roughly about 64% of as effective as the top offense in college football last season. That's a pretty significant fall off. LSU did put up huge numbers offensively last year. They just had one of the worst defenses we've recorded for a top 10 team. Their offense was amazing. Their defense was unbelievably bad last year. Anyway, so they were number 3 overall in 22. That was a really good offense, but still nothing like, I think what we maybe come to expect for Ryan, or maybe had been led to expect from Ryan Day from his early season, his first season in 2019, when they had an incredible running game, and really were able to hit a lot of play action and option routes off of that with Justin Fields. Last season, they struggled overall at drive efficiency. This is one of the most important metrics in Beta Rank. The ability to sustain drives and put up points. This is about play calling. It's about consistency. It's about avoiding penalties. It's about execution. They were not able to string together drives to be able to put up points. This is something they absolutely have to improve on coming into next season. Number 10 overall in explosive drives. They were still a really explosive offense. There's still room for improvement here, as you can see overall. Number 8 in play efficiency. So outside of explosives, their yards per play. This is the least important of the core 4 Beta Rank metrics, but their ability to generate yards per play out of explosives is still pretty good. Number 10 overall in negative drives. There's some room for improvement here. This is avoiding 3 and outs, avoiding turnovers, not letting the defense do bad things to you. Again, some significant room for improvement here. This is the part that gets a little I want to say unbelievable about the Buckeyes last season, because look, it's like they had a real problem at quarterback last year, and I don't think that they were expecting to be kind of in the position they were, and I think that there's a reasonable argument. There's a reasonable argument that the Buckeyes struggled to run the ball because they didn't have the passing game going enough to open it up. But they were number 8 overall in effective pass. They still got quite a bit out of their passing game. And they just struggled again to run the football under Ryan Day. And look, they hired, they hired the offensive line coach that, Day came up under Chip Kelly, runs a similar-ish, although I think Kelly runs a more advanced run system these days, run scheme, and they hired Justin Fry over from UCLA to be the offensive line coach to fix the offensive line. And it just hasn't been there. They really struggled to run the ball last year. That's a problem. Look, the Buckeyes have no shortage of running back talent. I think all the questions that remain here are on the offensive line. And I feel like it's been that way since 2019 for this, Buckeye team. The Buckeyes in 2019 were outstanding. They ran the ball like a service academy. They were that effective at it. It was an incredible season for them running the football. You've got Will Howard at quarterback in all likelihood coming into this year. He completed 61.3% of his passes last season, 7.4 per. He's competing against Devin Brown, who completed 57.1% of his passes, 7.8 per in more limited action. Of course, Will Howard was at Kansas State last season. And they also have 5-star Julian Sayin on campus, also competing for reps. I think for this Buckeye team in particular, the one thing to keep in mind with Will Howard, he does add some significant mobility and toughness as a runner in there. He is not the most accurate thrower down the field, just something to keep an eye on. Ryan Day's offense, if for what I think works for him, if he's calling plays and running things, Ryan Day's offense works best when they're able to run the football very well, and then hit deeper option routes down the field. This is going to have to be much more. They're going to have to get the running game going here, because I don't think you can really rely on Will Howard for that. This should be a bit of a different offense. Kelly also really likes to get the tight end involved, so look for that. Chip Kelly finding ways to hit tight ends that will remind you more of an NFL offense in some ways. And I think it's one of the things he picked up from his time in the NFL versus when he was from when he was at Oregon. He definitely incorporates the tight end more in, but look for some more interesting stuff in the run game too. Some more pin and pull type stuff in the run game. In particular, I think for this Buckeye offense, they allowed disruptive plays on 20.9% of plays last season. If you compare that to Georgia, that is a significant increase. Georgia only allowed them last season. And Georgia had the number 3 offense in college football last season. Georgia only allowed them on 14.89%. So that's something to clean up. Something like we talked about with that negative drives number being a bit too high. They had a 43.4 third down conversion rate last year. And that's again, like a bit of a drop off from the team we just previewed in Georgia. Georgia last season was a 55.1% third down conversion. Buckeyes need to, this is how drive efficiency, this is where babies come from. So converting, either don't put yourself in a position to have to convert third downs or convert them and you will sustain drives and put up points. I feel like that's somewhat self-explanatory, but they have 60% of their returning production coming back on the offensive side of the ball, 62% there. They're 67 overall in the ranking of returning production, 62%. Let me make sure I get that somewhat right. And then offensively, you're going to see some of this mirror what we saw, for the overall team grades. Indiana wasn't a great game for them. They had a really good game, of course, against Western Kentucky. That Maryland game for them offensively was pretty horrible. Good game against Purdue, less of a good game against Penn State overall. They really struggled a bit in that game. They had a really, really good offensive game against Michigan State. They had a pretty good offensive game against Michigan. Like we talked about, they just left some points on the board. I know you're coming back and saying like leaving points on the board, that matters. It absolutely does. But the process to get you to put points on the board matters a little more. It's a lot harder to, it's actually, you're going to have some misses in there. Like the part where you can actually like drive down and get in the, or put up big plays, that kind of thing. And like, even if you fail to put up points, like chances are eventually you will. They had a pretty good game there overall against Michigan. Let's go ahead and flip it over and look at the defensive side of the ball as I remember the buttons. All right. Number 1 overall defense last season. Jim Knowles is your defensive coordinator here. Just phenomenal. Just completely cleaned up the mess that Kerry Combs left. They don't just run cover 2 all the time anymore. Yeah. So they're number 1 overall in drive efficiency. They did an excellent job finding ways to get off the field and avoid giving up points. These are scaled to the top offense, just because I think that if you just looked at these in terms of the defensive ranking, you might come away thinking that like offense and defense are somewhat equal. In modern college football, they are not. Offense matters a bit more. It's a point scoring game these days. So they did a really good job, though, of finding ways to get off the field, not give up long drives. They were really good at containing big plays. Number 3 overall in explosive drives. Number 3 in play efficiency outside of explosives. They did a good job at limiting yards per play. What they struggled with, and I'm interested to see coming into this year, is negative drives, not forcing enough 3 and outs, not forcing enough turnovers. There's room for some improvement here, as good as they were. Number 8 overall in effective rush versus number 1 overall in effective pass. Excellent pass defense last season for the Buckeyes. Of course, I think if you go through the schedule last season, it's hard to think of anybody that could really throw it around that they faced too. That also didn't hurt. We do control for opponent though, so that helps. In that they were at number 19 in 2022. Just big improvement from Knowles, like really turning things around for them. I'm excited to see what they come back with this year. They created disruptive plays on 22.5% of their plays last season. That's just a little higher than Georgia's 21.9%. So again, this is a really, really good defense overall for them. Number 20, and they were 28.6% on allowing third down conversions. Again, that's a little worse than Georgia's overall, but they found other ways to get off the field and avoid giving up points. There's very little room for criticism on this defense off of where they were last season. Number 38 overall in Bill Connolly's returning production numbers. 68% of their production is coming back from last year, and they have some really important players coming back. I think the one thing to keep an eye on with this defense is, are they able to get the pass rush really going again? Feels like it's been a while since they had anybody that you'd really be talking about as like a top 3 or 4 pick. And that used to be pretty regular for them being able to generate pass rushers. as far as their games went last season, the defense actually had a pretty good game against Indiana overall and a good game against Kentucky. They struggled a bit against the Irish compared to how they performed versus the rest of the season. The Irish were able to drive a little bit, put together some drives a bit in that game. They had a really, really good game against a horrible Penn State offense. Of course, I'm fascinated to see what the new Penn State offense looks like. They made it. Although I will say James Franklin makes some good hires on paper often. I like this hire for the Kansas offensive coordinator. Now the defenses, they did struggle against Michigan, versus what they had performed at for the rest of the season. That's just something to keep an eye on here. I think a lot of the blame went to the offense, but the defense didn't have their best game in that Michigan game. Let's go ahead and look at the schedule here. So this is, I still don't have the schedule file. They're still dinking around at the folks. I buy data from the same folks that provide data to the College Football Playoff Committee. They're still dinking around a bit this offseason. I don't have the schedule file yet. So they have 12 games against FBS opponents. They have a just impossibly boring non-conference schedule. Akron, Western Michigan, and Marshall. I feel like there's not a ton to say here other than just keep an eye on how Will Howard is playing. We're not going to get a really good sense in any of these games how Howard and the offense are really gelling. I would just say don't try to take too much away from it, right? Like, see that they're in tune, that the timing's working. You're going to want to see them putting up just a mountain of points here and blowing people out of the water. You're going to want to see how Howard as sharp as he can get. I would keep an eye on the running game. You want that to look particularly sharp. Look, I really like Jonathan Smith. I think he is one of the best coaches in college football, and I think he's underrated. I'm excited to see him take over Michigan State. I do think that they are going to have a bit of an uphill battle there, getting that program turned around. I will say, one of the things you immediately noticed when Smith took over at Oregon State, and it was actually at Ohio State, was the significant improvement in competence on the offensive play calling. That's something to keep an eye on here in this Michigan State game. But I would be surprised if it's a really stiff test for the Buckeye offense. That said, it will be the first time they're playing somebody with a mild pulse, maybe not too much of a pulse, but a mild pulse. So do keep an eye on what the Buckeye running game looks like here, because they have struggled at times in the past. We've got them they're going to, in order for this game to be competitive, they probably needed to turn it over 3 times. But this next game, even though they're going to be favored pretty significantly in this game, they absolutely should. It's at home. Against Iowa, and yes, Iowa no longer has the nepotism child as its offensive coordinator. They didn't go out and make an absolute gangbuster of a hire in Tim Brewster. They should, however, be significantly better. But the thing to watch for here is, of course, now we get to see them against Phil Parker's defense, and this is Phil Parker, for bang for your buck, might be the best defensive coordinator in all of college football. I know Jim Knowles deserves a ton of credit. Phil Parker doesn't have anything like the talent Jim Knowles has had. I mean, although Jim Knowles put up an amazing defense at Oklahoma State, so they're both really good. Phil Parker has a really, really long track record at Iowa, putting up really good defenses, though. This should be a really, really tough test, and we'll get to find out a lot about this. They should still win the game. The offense is going to have a lot of short field. The Ohio State defense should shut down the Hawkeyes offense pretty handily. That's going to set up the Buckeye offense with some short field position. But what does it look like? Are they able to generate yards and put up points? The best offenses in college football are going to score on the best defenses. Can Ohio State really cash it in, and put up some points and look competent here? Because the next they get to go on the road to Eugene. This Oregon team should be really good. We've got them projected at number 3. We have them as a slight favorite because they're at home here. Oregon, because they're at home here. I really do like Oregon a lot. I mean, I like Oregon a lot coming to the season. I think this game could be pretty tight. Oregon has a shot to have the best offense in college football, like I said, with Dylan Gabriel running Will Stein's offense. I think Oregon's defense there is maybe the one to keep an eye on, the unit to keep an eye on, along with Ohio State's offense in this game. Lanning has not been able to get the defense into the top 10 yet. I should say, into the top 5. They need to make an improvement this year if Oregon wants to compete for a national title. But the offense should be really good. This matchup against, Jim Knowles defense, probably the headline matchup, I think, of the season, this Will Stein offense against Jim Knowles defense. But the game might be very much decided on the other side of the football if the Buckeyes are able to move the ball in this game, and they are able to, put up points. Or what does Oregon's defense look like? Is Will Howard a liability? Is Chip Kelly enough of a play caller to get him over the hump? A lot could be right. Look, with the expanded playoff, it's not make or break. But the mood in Columbus, if they don't win this one, could be a little sour, even though you're still likely going to make the playoff. This Nebraska team, I think, should be improving, but I'm not sold on Marcus Satterfield as an offensive coordinator. I think, but now again, Matt Rule, they've improved a lot on defense. This is somewhat I expect this Nebraska team to turn into something similar to his Baylor teams, and that they were really, really good defensively, but a little bit of a snooze fest on offense. I'm not sure that Dylan Raiola actually cures that. There's only so much a quarterback can do for an offense that's just not well designed or well called. Nebraska should be better, I think, than this number 50 overall projection that we have for them. I think the defense improves. I think the offense improves with Raiola there. But by how much, I'm not sure. This game might be closer to 2 touchdowns by the time we get to see it. This Penn State game should be really interesting. We have them projected at number 6 overall. The defense for the Nittany Lions was fantastic last season. I expect them to be really good again. Manny Diaz really put it together, and I was skeptical. Really put it together as a defensive play caller for them. This game is on the road at Happy Valley. This should be a tough one for the Buckeyes. I think the thing to watch here is Penn State's offense was horrible last season for how much talent they had on the side, and Yurcich just could not get it going. In steps, and it's Andy. Oh, geez, I should have. I got to get it written down somewhere. It's like Koltecki, the guy coming in from Kansas. I'm just a phenomenal hire. I thought Kansas's offense was fantastic. Should be fun to watch. I think what he's able to do with the talent that Penn State has, we're going to have a really good idea, of course, who the Nittany Lions are offensively by the time we get to this game. We've got the Buckeyes favored here by about 6.5 on the road. This might be closer to about 3 by the time we get here. I think this Penn State team has a shot to be a dark horse team, a shot that maybe the Big Ten could be in the conversation for maybe 3 teams in the playoffs if they play up to what they I think are some pretty reasonable expectations. But truly outside of Oregon, coming in next year, it's the Big Ten is still extremely. You could include Oregon here. It's just an extremely top heavy conference. Most of these teams aren't very good. Purdue's another one. I like Ryan Walters. It's all going to depend on if he can get the defense fixed, I think, for the Boilermakers. If not, the Boilermakers could be in for a long season. If they do improve on this is maybe closer to 18 by the time we get there. Northwestern, there were some positives last season, surprisingly. But the Buckeyes should still be a heavy favorite here on the road. At a very interesting on-campus stadium that the Wildcats have put together. Indiana, again, this one, this one shouldn't be. I think there's some reason to be positive about the Cignetti hire. He certainly cashed in, and turned it into a bigger job, his recent success. But I don't expect them to be a quick turnaround candidate here. And you come into Michigan, this Michigan team, there are, I just think, Michigan projected at 11, the Buckeyes should be a favorite here. They should be a favorite by even perhaps more than a touchdown coming into this game. I think that's very reasonable. The Wolverines lose a ton of production. They have massive turnover on the coaching staff. This should be the year, barring the Buckeyes are probably going to have to turn it over 2 times. So if they do that, of course, we'll see. Maybe Michigan outperforms expectations, but they should be coming into a rebuilding year, I think, given how much production they've lost and how they've consistently developed that team, plus losing the coaching staff there. All right. We did it. I had a lot to say, so we're 35 minutes. So my little thing of like 25 minutes, yeah, no. Apologies. There's more to say about the Buckeyes because they have a new offensive coordinator, and there's just so much pressure on Ryan Day in a way that there just isn't on Kirby Smart at all at this point. So that said, I'm really excited to see the Buckeyes this season. Like, I think that they are, like I said, like I don't expect them to like blow the doors off of anyone offensively, but I think the thing to keep an eye on if you want to see where the Buckeyes maybe land this season is to really keep an eye on by the time they hit Big Ten play, like where's the run game, right? Like if they're able to run the ball somewhat effectively against Iowa, even though and Iowa may be loading it up. I mean, they may load up the line of scrimmage and challenge the Buckeyes to throw the football. I'm interested to see what that looks like. I still think, of course, the Buckeyes have a fantastic, wide receiver room, even though they lost some guys. Like they just have developed and recruited so well. But it's going to be interesting to see. I don't think Will Howard's going to kill you. But like we saw against his game last season against Oklahoma State, I mean, he can. Will Howard can actually kill you in some games. Like I said, his downfield accuracy sometimes leaves something to be desired. So when Kelly's offense is working really well, Howard's going to likely be able to hit some open guys. If he's looking downfield, his shots downfield are going to be more around deception, looking to hit some tight ends, breaking open in bend routes, maybe get lost, get lost a little bit in coverage. So I think, but the main thing to keep an eye on is I just think the run game has to work for the Buckeyes next season offensively for this to work out for them. I just don't think if it's not working out for them and you have Will Howard as your quarterback and you have Chip Kelly, who's never been, and I hope you all know this, has never been a throw it around kind of guy. I mean, he can adapt. I'm not saying, Chip Kelly is not in stone, but he's never been a sling it around kind of offensive play caller. If you have Will Howard at quarterback and Chip Kelly and Chip does like an experienced quarterback, he will go with the guy that, he will go with the guy that has the most starts a lot. It could be interesting. Like I have a hard time seeing that. Really, like they have to fix the run game. They just have to. So when they get to, it had better work against Michigan State, and it had also better work against Iowa. And they had and Will Howard, if you are loading up the box, he had better been able, they better be able to scheme up and get some stuff, otherwise. Because I don't think it's gonna work for them if they against a regular box if they can't run the football. They just don't. I don't think they have the guys. Like Will Howard's not a first round pick at all. Anyway, that said, the defense should be phenomenal next year. I think the thing to keep an eye out for them on defense is just how good can they be. I fully expect this to be the number one defense in college football next season. Can they be even better when they were last year? Can they create more negative plays? Can they put a number that's like maybe they're not at 21 Georgia, 19 Clemson numbers, but can they get closer than they were last year? If they can, it can help offset a lot. That 21 Georgia team didn't have a great offense. They had a phenomenal defense. They had one of the best defenses we've measured in college, at Beta Rank. And can their special teams improve a bit? Can they get into the top 10, be a little more consistent on field position, hit some more field goals? Anyway, let's finish this up. I'm as we covered at the top, I'm Rob Bowron. I'm the econometrician behind Beta Rank. You can find all the stats you saw and a whole lot more at sharpcollegefootball.com. You can find me at Beta Rank FB or at Sharp College Football. Hit me with questions, comments, nasty remarks. Just don't, for the love of God, hit me with counting stats. I don't care. You've come to the wrong store, my friends. We used to have a Pac-12 podcast. We don't. You can still find back episodes of that. TBD on getting that all going again. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. I'll try to get to Oregon pretty quick and previewing them since they're at number 3. Should be a really fun season coming in the next year. And every time I do one of these previews, I get more excited. Work's been really busy. I'm sure that's true. I mean, work's been really busy, and work, family, house crap. A lot going on in the world. But when I do these and I sort of dive back in, like I get really excited for the season. This should be a fun year. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you